Daniel was born into a kind of comfort so complete that struggle sounded like a rumor from another land. In those days, people used to say his first cry echoed against marble walls, not because the house was loud, but because it was vast, wide corridors, polished floors, tall gates that opened slowly, as if even iron had learned patience inside that compound. The house stood in the city like a chief among huts, quiet yet commanding, clean yet intimidating. Servants moved through it like trained shadows, careful not to disturb the order of wealth. They cooked before hunger spoke, cleaned before dust dared to settle, and obeyed before instructions were fully formed. From the moment Daniel could point a finger, the word responded. If he frowned, someone rushed. If he shouted, someone trembled. If he wanted, it appeared. No one ever asked him to wait. No one ever told him no. And because his feet were always carried, because his hands were always served, Daniel grew without ever learning the weight of effort. In the old way of storytelling, elders would later say, a child who never touches the ground forgets that the earth can be hard. As Daniel grew, the house grew quieter around him, not from peace, but from fear. He learned early that his voice was power. He learned that anger opened doors faster than kindness. When water was warm instead of cold, he insulted the servant. When food arrived late by a few minutes, he overturned plates. His laughter was loud, but it never invited others in, it pushed them away. Respect, to him, was not something earned, it was something demanded. The servants endured in silence, because silence fed their families. His parents watched from a distance, confused by the boy they loved yet no longer recognized. They corrected him gently, then withdrew when he fled. They promised discipline tomorrow, then postponed it out of guilt. Love softened their resolve, and wealth blinded their fear. In the evenings, when guests praised Daniel's fine clothes and sharp tongue, his parents smiled politely, but when night came and the house slept, worry sat between them like an unspoken guest. In African folktales, it is often said that when a child's faults are ignored, they grow teeth. Daniel's faults were already biting, though no one yet dared to name the wound. When Daniel entered school, the world widened, but his character did not. He arrived late and unapologetic, his uniform pressed, his shoes untouched by dust. Teachers spoke, he listened only enough to know he did not have to obey. He used his phone in class, laughed during lessons, and walked through corridors as if they were built for his footsteps alone. Other students felt small around him, not because he was strong, but because his confidence was sharp and careless. He mocked those who struggled, dismissed those who questioned him, and treated rules like decorations, nice to look at, easy to ignore. Whenever punishment approached, it disappeared, dissolved by a phone call, erased by influence. Daniel learned a dangerous lesson very quickly, that money could bend authority, and that consequences were for people without protection. In the wider community, whispers began to travel. In churches, in quiet corners of gatherings, people shook their heads gently and said, that boy is being raised by gold, not by values. Yet no one confronted him. In many villages, people believe a child's correction is the duty of the home, not the crowd. So they waited, and waiting, sometimes, is the longest mistake. Daniel's parents felt the weight of those whispers more than anyone knew. Outwardly, they remained respected, greeted warmly, spoken of with admiration. Inwardly, they were restless. They had given their son everything except limits, and now limits were what he needed most. They watched him grow taller, louder, colder. They saw how servants avoided his eyes, how teachers avoided conflict, how discipline slipped through his fingers like water. One evening, after another report from school, they sat together in silence longer than usual. It was the kind of silence that carries decisions. In old stories, elders say that when a river refuses to change its path, the land must change around it. With heavy hearts, they chose a path that felt like failure but carried hope. They decided Daniel would leave the comfort that shaped him and enter a place where his name meant nothing, where money spoke no language, where discipline ruled without apology. A strict boarding school. Not as punishment, but as rescue. Daniel did not understand the choice when it was made. He laughed it off, confident the world would bend as it always had. He did not know that for the first time in his life, the ground was waiting for his feet. The ground was waiting for Daniel's feet, but Daniel did not yet feel it. To him, the decision to send him away sounded temporary, almost theatrical, like a thread that would dissolve with time. He believed rules existed only to be negotiated, that authority could always be softened, delayed, or erased. In the days that followed his parents' announcement, he moved through the house with exaggerated confidence, laughing louder than usual, issuing commands with sharper edges. He told himself this boarding school would be no different from his own school, another place where names mattered, where money whispered on his behalf. but his parents had changed. Something in their eyes had hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. They no longer argued with him. They no longer explained. They watched him the way farmers watch a stubborn field before deciding to burn it so new crops can grow. In the quiet of the evenings, his mother prayed without words, and his father stared at walls as if counting unseen cracks. In African storytelling, it is often said that when parents stop shouting, change is already walking toward the child. Daniel mistook their silence for weakness. He did not know it was preparation. At school, his behavior worsened, as if some part of him sensed the end of his unchecked reign. He skipped classes entirely, wandered into lessons he did not belong to, and laughed when teachers called his name. He challenged authority openly now, not just with actions, but with words sharp enough to humiliate. Classmates avoided him, not because they admired him, but because he was unpredictable. He enjoyed the fear he caused. It made him feel tall. When punishment letters came home, his parents no longer intercepted them. They read them slowly, painfully, as if each sentence confirmed what they had long feared. Teachers who once excused Daniel now spoke plainly. "Your son is intelligent," they said, "but he is empty of discipline." In the staff rooms, heads were shaken. In the corridors, students whispered. Daniel stood at the center of it all, untouched, convinced that consequences were stories told to scare the powerless. The community watched quietly, because in many African communities, people believe shame travels faster than correction. And Daniel's name was beginning to move on its own. At home, the servants felt the shift before anyone else. Daniel's words cut deeper, his demands came faster, his temper shorter. The house that once moved around him with practice calm now moved carefully, like a place walking on cracked ground. One afternoon, when a servant delayed bringing his food, Daniel exploded, overturning a chair, his voice echoing through the wide rooms. His father stood up then, not shouting, not threatening, just standing. And for a moment, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Resistance. It was brief, but it lingered. That night, his parents spoke to him without softness. They told him he was leaving soon. No negotiations, no delays. Daniel laughed at first, then scoffed, then grew quiet. He accused them of betrayal, of embarrassment, of choosing society over their own son. His mother listened with tears in her eyes. His father listened with his jaw set. In the old way, elders say, a parent's heart breaks twice, once when the child is born, and again when the child must be saved from himself. That night, sleep did not come easily to anyone in the house. The days before departure passed slowly, like time thickened by tension. Daniel packed carelessly, tossing expensive clothes into boxes without thought. He bragged to friends that he would return unchanged, that this boarding school would break before he did. Yet when visitors came, when neighbors offered quiet advice, his confidence wavered just enough to annoy him. He began to feel watched, judged, measured. At church, sermons about humility felt too direct. At gatherings, greetings grew shorter. The world that once celebrated him now seemed to be stepping back. His parents noticed this too. They saw how isolation had begun its work, how privilege without character leaves a person standing alone. Still, the decision remained firm. The school had been chosen carefully, far from the city, far from influence, a place known not for comfort, but for discipline. A place where rules were not explained, only enforced. Daniel's parents did not tell him everything. Some lessons must be learned by living through them. On the morning of departure, the house felt different. Quieter, heavier. Servants stood still as Daniel walked past, unsure whether to wish him well or stay silent. His mother adjusted his collar with shaking hands, holding on to him longer than necessary. His father placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said only one sentence, "Where you are going, your name will not help you." Daniel nodded, pretending not to care, but the words followed him to the car, settling somewhere deep. As the gate opened, the same gates that had once announced his importance, Daniel looked back at the house that had raised him without resistance. He did not know that this comfort had been both gift and curse. As the car pulled away, the city fading behind him, Daniel believed he was being sent away because others could not handle him. He did not yet understand the truth. He was being sent away because he had never learned to handle himself. And ahead of him, waiting patiently, was a place that would not bend, not listen to money, not fear his voice. The ground was no longer waiting. It was ready. The ground was no longer waiting. It rose to meet Daniel the moment the car stopped at the gates of the boarding school. The compound did not announce itself with beauty or softness. There were no polished stones, no smiling faces rushing forward, no sense of welcome carefully arranged. The buildings stood firm and plain, as if they had been planted there to endure storms rather than impress visitors. visitors. A tall iron gate closed behind him with a sound that felt final, a sound that did not echo but settled. Daniel stepped out of the car expecting eyes, recognition, hesitation. None came. Boys moved past him carrying buckets, brooms, books pressed tightly to their chests. No one slowed down. No one cared. For the first time in his life, Daniel stood in a place where his presence meant nothing. His name was not announced. His background was not questioned. He was handed a list, a bed number, and a warning spoken without emotion. Rules here are not explained twice. The car that brought him drove away, taking comfort with it, leaving Daniel standing with his bags, surrounded by a silence that did not fear him. In old stories, elders say that the first lesson of discipline is loneliness. Daniel felt it immediately. The first days were a shock that refused to soften. Morning began before the sun rose, not with gentle knocks, but with whistles sharp enough to slice sleep apart. Daniel woke confused, disoriented, angry. He waited for someone to come tell him what to do. No one did. He waited longer, and punishment came instead. He was assigned chores without apology, scrubbing floors, washing toilets, carrying water until his arms burned. His clothes were no longer washed for him. His bed was no longer made. Mistakes were corrected instantly, not with explanations, but with consequences. Daniel rebelled loudly at first. He shouted. He argued. He demanded. The rules did not respond. Punishments came swiftly and consistently, like rain that does not stop because someone complains. He skipped duties and was made to repeat them. He talked back and was silenced with extra work. At night, exhausted and sore, he lay on a thin mattress staring at a ceiling that offered no comfort. The boy who had never known hunger now ate without preference. The boy who had never waited now stood in lines. In African folktales, it is said that fire reveals what gold is made of. Daniel was burning, and he did not yet know what would remain. Loneliness did what punishment alone could not. Surrounded by boys, Daniel felt completely alone. No one admired him. No one feared him. Some avoided him, others ignored him entirely. His jokes fell flat. His insults returned to him untouched. Slowly, painfully, Daniel realized that without privilege, he was ordinary, and that terrified him. At night, when the lights went out and the noise settled, his anger softened into something heavier. Regret tried to speak, but pride covered its mouth. Tears came silently, surprising him. He cried not only from pain, but from confusion. He had always believed strength was loud. Here, strength was quiet and unbending. During the day, he clung to rebellion because it was familiar. At night, doubt crept in. He began to understand that this place was not trying to break him quickly. It was willing to wait. Elders often say, a stubborn tree is not cut in a day, it is starved of excuses. The boarding school starved Daniel of everything he used to survive. It was during one of his punishments, scrubbing steps under the afternoon sun, that Daniel first noticed the hostel master watching him. The man did not interrupt. He did not shout. He simply observed, leaning slightly on a wooden railing, eyes calm and unreadable. Later, Daniel learned his name, Mr. Okorie. Unlike others, Mr. Okorie did not seem rushed by anger or satisfied by discipline alone. When Daniel finished his task, exhausted and sweating, the man called him over. There was no lecture, no threat, only a question spoken slowly. Do you know why this place feels heavy to you? Daniel scoffed, expecting punishment to follow. Instead, Mr. Okorie continued, because here, effort comes before comfort. That was all. He dismissed Daniel with a nod. The simplicity of the moment unsettled him more than shouting ever had. Over the following days, Mr. Okorie appeared often, not hovering, not rescuing, but present. When Daniel was punished, he was punished fairly. When he worked hard, the work was acknowledged quietly. Discipline, Daniel began to realize, was not personal here. It was purposeful. Still, Daniel resisted change with everything he had. He tested limits, pushed rules, searched for weaknesses. He found none. Each failure weighed heavier than the last. His body grew stronger from labor, but his pride weakened. One evening, after another long day, Mr. Okorie sat beside him on a bench as the sun fell behind the buildings. You think discipline is meant to hurt you, he said, eyes fixed ahead. But discipline only hurts what refuses to grow. Daniel wanted to argue. He wanted to dismiss the words. Instead, he stayed silent. For the first time, silence did not feel like defeat. It felt like listening. That night, as Daniel lay awake, something shifted, not enough to change him, not yet, but enough to open a small crack. In African folktales, transformation never arrives like thunder. It begins like a whisper, barely noticed, but impossible to forget. And in that quiet hostel, under rules that did not bend and guidance that did not shout, Daniel stood at the edge of himself, unsure of what he would become, but certain of one thing: the ground beneath him was firm, and it was not moving away. The ground beneath Daniel was firm, and it did not move away, but something within him finally did. The change did not come like surrender. It came like exhaustion. After weeks of resistance, after anger burned itself thin, Daniel woke one morning and followed the routine without arguing. He rose when the whistle sounded. He made his bed carefully, not because he feared punishment, but because disorder now felt heavier than effort. The bucket he once dragged angrily was lifted with steady hands. The work was the same, the rules unchanged, yet something inside him had quieted. In African folktales, elders say that a stone does not soften because it is struck, but because it listens to water. Daniel had stopped shouting at the current. He had begun to listen. He still felt resentment, but it no longer ruled him. In that silence, he noticed things he had ignored before: the discipline in others' movements, the pride hidden inside routine, the dignity of boys who walked without complaint. For the first time, Daniel wondered what they knew that he did not. His conversations with Mr. Okorie grew longer, though never dramatic. The hostel master did not praise Daniel excessively, nor did he remind him of his past. He spoke in fragments, in images. "A sharp knife cuts best when it is guided," he said one afternoon. "Power without control wounds the hand that holds it." Daniel absorbed these words slowly, testing them against his own experience. He began to see discipline not as an enemy, but as a structure, something that held a person upright when motivation failed. When Daniel completed tasks well, Mr. Okorie acknowledged him with a nod. When he failed, correction came without anger. This consistency confused Daniel at first. He had grown up where moods ruled decisions, where shouting changed outcomes. Here, effort spoke louder than emotion. In that steady environment, Daniel's fear faded. He no longer felt haunted by punishment. He felt measured by responsibility. Small changes followed. Daniel began helping others, not dramatically, not for attention, but quietly. He showed a younger boy how to scrub a floor properly so it would not have to be redone. He shared notes with a classmate who struggled. This act surprised even him. There was no reward waiting, no applause, yet the satisfaction felt deeper than any praise he had known before. He discovered that respect earned was lighter than respect demanded. Slowly, boys who once avoided him began to greet him. Trust did not arrive quickly, but it arrived honestly. In class, Daniel started listening. At first, concentration came in short bursts, then longer ones. His mind, once scattered by arrogance, began to settle. He failed tests, improved slightly, failed again, then improved more. Progress was uneven, but it was real. In folktales, growth is never straight. It circles, stumbles, pauses. Daniel learned patience with himself the way discipline had been patient with him. As months passed, responsibility found him rather than being forced upon him. Teachers noticed his consistency. Younger students watched his transformation with cautious curiosity. When asked to lead a small group, Daniel hesitated, not from fear, but from awareness. Leadership, he realized, was no longer about control. It was about example. He spoke less, listened more. When conflicts arose, he remembered his past and chose restraint. There were moments when his old temper stirred, moments when pride knocked loudly at the door. But now he recognized it. He did not always win those battles, yet he fought them honestly. Each victory strengthened him. Each failure taught him humility. The discipline that once felt like fire now felt like guidance. Elders say, the same fire that burns the forest cooks the meal. Daniel was learning which heat to respect. By the time graduation approached, Daniel no longer counted days. Time had stopped being something to escape. It had become something to use. His academic performance had improved, not to brilliance, but to reliability. More importantly, his character had changed in ways no certificate could capture. When he stood among others, he no longer needed to be tallest. When spoken to, he listened. When corrected, he adjusted. On his final night in the hostel, Daniel sat alone on the same bench where silence silence had first taught him to listen. There was no grand speech, no emotional release, just understanding. He had arrived broken by comfort and shaped by resistance. He was living grounded, aware, unfinished, but real. In African folktales, transformation is not celebrated with noise. It is recognized in stillness. And as Daniel prepared to return to the world he once ruled without merit, he carried something new within him, not fear of discipline, but gratitude for it. Daniel carried that gratitude quietly as he returned to the world he once ruled without merit. The journey home felt shorter than the one that had taken him away, yet heavier with meaning. When the gates of his family house opened again, they no longer looked like symbols of power. They looked like memories. The house was the same, wide, polished, careful, but Daniel was not. He stepped inside without expectation, without command. The servants froze at first, unsure which version of him had returned. When he greeted them respectfully, some looked up in disbelief. When he carried his own bag, silence spread through the room like a held breath. His parents watched from a distance, afraid to hope too quickly. Change, they had learned, must be observed, not assumed. Days passed. Daniel spoke gently. He listened fully. He helped without being asked. His temper surfaced occasionally, but it did not rule him. When anger rose, he paused. That pause, the space between feeling and action, was new. In African folktales, elders say that wisdom is not the absence of fire, but the control of it. His parents saw the difference not in his words, but in his consistency. The child who had left their home believing the world owed him had returned understanding that life responds only to effort and character. Years unfolded quietly. Daniel pursued his education with steady focus, no longer chasing recognition, but competence. He walked where others walked, waited where others waited, failed where others failed. His success, when it came, was built slowly, layer by layer, without shortcuts. People who met him later never guessed his past. They knew him as reliable, thoughtful, grounded. Only those who had known him before understood the distance he had traveled. His parents, once burdened by shame, now watched with quiet pride. They did not boast. They remembered too clearly how fragile growth can be. In time, Daniel returned to the boarding school, not as a student, but as an invitation. Standing at the same gate where his pride had first been stripped away, he felt humility settle comfortably in his chest. The buildings had not changed. The rules had not softened. The ground remained firm. He smiled, understanding now that this place had not been cruel. It had been honest. When Daniel stood before the students as a guest speaker, his voice carried no performance. He did not dramatize his past. He did not excuse it. He told the truth plainly, that he had once believed power came from money, from shouting, from being feared. He spoke of how discipline had felt like punishment until he learned its purpose. He spoke of nights when loneliness taught him more than comfort ever had. Among the staff, Mr. Okorie listened quietly from the back, arms folded, eyes calm. Daniel met his gaze once and nodded. No words were needed. When Daniel addressed the students directly, he said something that stayed long after he left. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is its foundation. The hall was silent. In that silence, understanding took root. African folktales often end not with applause, but with reflection. This was such a moment. After the visit, Daniel walked the compound alone, tracing the paths he once scrubbed angrily, the benches where silence had reshaped him. He realized that transformation had not erased his past, it had given it meaning. Without arrogance, he would not have understood humility. Without resistance, he would not have recognized guidance. Life, he now knew, teaches in cycles. Those who refuse lessons repeat them. Those who listen grow. As he left the school, he felt no urge to look back with regret. Gratitude was enough. In the years that followed, Daniel became a mentor to others, not through speeches, but through example. He corrected gently. He led patiently. He remembered how easily power corrupts when it has no roots. And so he built roots wherever he stood. In the telling of this story, elders would say that Daniel's life proved an old truth: a spoiled beginning does not condemn the ending. A child raised without struggle can still learn strength. A heart hardened by comfort can still soften under guidance. Discipline, when given with purpose, does not destroy, it directs. And so Daniel's journey became more than his own. It became a reminder passed from voice to voice, from one generation to the next, that no matter how far a person strays, when the ground finally meets their feet, it can still teach them how to stand.